You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Conservator.
There you go.
All right, perfect.
Welcome to episode 9 of A Life in Ruins podcast. I'm your host, Carlton Gover, and as always, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Conrad Yonan and David Howe. Tonight's guest, Raven Todd DaSilva, is an archaeologist and conservator who just finished her Master's of Science with a focus on conservation. She graduated with distinction from the University of Toronto with a Bachelor of Arts. She runs a very popular Instagram and YouTube channel called Dig It with Raven and is an excellent science communicator. Our co-hosts are familiar with conservation and curation from an American theoretical stance, and we are really interested to hear more about European conservation and European archaeology from Raven.
All right, Raven, if you don't mind introducing who you are real quick and where you are currently.
Yeah, all right. Well, good evening, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Hello.
Hi, guys. So I am currently in Amsterdam, and I just graduated a week ago, essentially, from my Master's of Conservation and Restoration of Cultural Heritage from the University of Amsterdam. And I specialized in the conservation of ceramics, glass, and stone, focusing mainly on archaeological objects. And so my bachelor's was more archaeology, ancient civ based, moved over to Europe after a quarter-life crisis, and ended up with a Master's of Science afterwards. So it turned out okay, I guess. And yeah, now I'm hosting a YouTube channel and an Instagram page based on archaeology, history, conservation, where I try and kind of give a kind of like an online free course on the basics of archaeology, making it accessible for everybody.
Well, that's awesome, actually. And sorry, I didn't mean to say actually, but what I'm trying to say is congratulations on getting your master's is the words I'm trying to say, because that's a huge thing to do. How do you feel?
Not as excited as I thought I would.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
We understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Staring into the abyss of what life is after school.
Mm-hmm. The existential crisis is settling in quite nicely, which is always great.
Yes, it doesn't end. I think I'm 2 years out. Connor's 3 years out, and Carlton, you're a few months out.
I'm still in school. Unlike you two, I pursued a PhD. Thank you very much. So don't try to throw me under the bus with that master's nonsense. I thought we were over that.
I was just saying that you got your master's, but yeah. So what made you want to go overseas to Europe, if you don't mind like us asking that, as opposed to staying over here in the States or in Canada?
Well, the biggest draw for me was that there aren't many schools for conservation in Canada. There's only one university that has a full-on program. In the States, you have a bunch. They're really great, but they're also very expensive for international students, which is no fun. And then, it's ridiculous. And then I can't work over there either. So I was looking over in Europe because I have an EU passport. And it's much cheaper to come to school here. And they have really, really good programs and it's a lot more central if you're studying more European archaeology, ancient Mediterranean archaeology. It's a little bit easier to go here and you have more access to the things that you want to study.
I think our last guest, Irina Bacci, she also went to the University of Toronto and was saying that it was really difficult to find a school that funds like foreign students in the United States. So I get that's why you went over there.
That was one of the reasons, yes. I first went to Germany because for tuition there, it's only about 200 euros a semester.
Whoa.
What?
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah.
What am I doing
so I know,
Colorado?
right?
Jesus.
Gold is cheap. What are you talking about?
Right.
Yeah, but they also have really good programs over here for what I needed to study, and they have a lot more opportunity than in Canada. Like, there's only one school in Canada that I could have gone to, and the program wasn't really focused on where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. So I kind of moved over to Germany, did an internship there, realized maybe I didn't want to spend the next 5 years speaking German in class. And so I moved over to Amsterdam, and they have an amazing program, which is a direct master's instead of doing another bachelor's. So I kind of found my way through trial and error, really.
As a person who suffered through a master's degree, did you have to write a thesis as part of it, or is it a little different?
No, I had to write a thesis. In our second year, we have a 4-month thesis project, and I did mine on... So with the conservation department, it has to be a little bit more science-based, essentially, so very diagnostic. And they found these pre-dynastic, early dynastic bowls from ancient Egypt, from one of the antiquities museums here, that had these very curious black spots on them. And my entire thesis was essentially, what are the black spots? So it's not the most exciting thesis, but it ended up okay.
I'm going to throw you a curveball. Mm-hmm. What are the black spots?
Manganese dendrites.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. So they're like these
okay.
pseudo-fossils, essentially.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. There's some chert out here that has like this weird blue like speckling to it, and maybe it has something to do with that too, but that's really interesting.
Yeah,
there's a chert that has dendritic inclusions, is what they call it. It's pretty diagnostic.
Yeah, they look like they're growing, right?
Yeah, and they're little fossils, like you were saying. Are they seashells?
No, they're just they're pseudo-fossils, essentially. So how they grew is that the burial site that they were in, all the bowls were found in tombs, and it was a very wet site, like there's a lot of flooding from the Nile, from what I was looking at with the spatial analysis. And it seems that there was a supersaturated solution of manganese, and as the water evaporated or left, the manganese kind of stayed and formed on the bowls and kind of grew in these fern, almost mold-like patterns.
Oh, that's really interesting. And kind of going off that, what made you get into archaeology and keep going through school and ultimately into higher education?
I've really always been into archaeology. I was that nerd in the library when I was like 4 or 5 years old, running around getting the books on ancient Egypt and the pyramids, and getting the movies about Bellerophon and the Pegasus, all that crap. It was really bad. And I was just always really into history. I had some amazing teachers in high school that really kept that passion alive. They were really like my best teachers I had were history teachers. And so it kind of kept it going throughout the whole thing. And I graduated my bachelor's. I got a job in a museum for about 2 years, realized this is not where I want to be. And I wanted to do more hands-on stuff, get back to my roots. And so that's how I ended up in Europe.
Then you're from Portugal, is that right?
I was born in Canada.
Canada, okay.
Yeah.
I think you had said that. But you have an EU passport, you had said?
I do, yeah. So my dad was born in Portugal, and they're just throwing them away over there. So I just had to show that, he was born there, and I'm technically sort of Portuguese, and they just gave me one.
That's dope.
Yeah, I feel like I cheated the system a little bit, but...
Yeah, I need to figure out how I could do that and go over there to school.
Well, in the Netherlands, we have the Dutch-American Friendship Treaty because you guys helped out so much during World War II. And you guys can move here a lot easier than the rest of the world can. Oh. Just as a fun little note for you. And even international student fees are cheaper than American student fees.
Huh.
I don't think they want us to know that.
No, I almost went to Utrecht for my PhD.
Oh, yeah.
And I regret that decision. Well, I don't regret that decision. I love CU Boulder, but there was a moment in my life where I almost went to Utrecht for my PhD, but I found it to be leaving the United States to study United States Great Plains archaeology just did not seem like the best idea.
No.
So that's why I stayed in the Great Plains. But anyways, since you're familiar with both the Canadian and European system, what are the differences in the education systems between those two areas?
It's a very broad question. The biggest thing that I can think of, because the European European education system is so different from country to country, right? So I only really have the knowledge for Dutch and German ones, and Canadian education systems also vary really greatly throughout the provinces. But the biggest difference I noticed, especially with a bachelor's, was that I did not have to write a bachelor's thesis to graduate from my first degree. And here you really always have to write a bachelor's thesis, and the degrees are only 3 years long. That was the biggest difference for me there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I think I would have had a hard time doing that at the end of my bachelor's degree, writing a master or writing a thesis. Yeah. Was it like a independent research project that you had to do as part of it?
From what I've heard from friends that have done their bachelor's here, yeah, there's kind of like their own. It's a real thesis, essentially, just not the bachelor's level, and then they can be up to 20,000 words.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's daunting.
Yeah. 22-year-old me would have not done that.
Oh, exactly. Right. Like, oh my gosh. And like my thesis was only 16,000 words. So I don't even know how they were even able to do that, 4 years ago for me, like when I was 22, it was really scary. So that was the biggest difference that I noticed. The grading is also very different, as well as the kind of course structure. I find the classes are smaller here, even though I'm a little biased because my program was only accepting 6 people every 2 years. So that's very small. But other classes I had seen as well are also a little bit more on the smaller side, where at the University of Toronto, I was having classes with 300, 400 people in them, sometimes 2,000. So it can quite vary that way as well.
Oh, that's really interesting. I had some classes in my undergrad that were those huge entry level ones that are 150 people, and you don't even know the professor because you're in the very back of this huge lecture hall. And I think I would appreciate more those kind of closer interactions with your professors, having that ratio of students to teachers being much better. I do better in that situation, and I think a lot of people do as well.
Oh, definitely. I've seen that a lot of people here have a much closer relationship with their professors and their teachers than I would, or other people I know did back in Canada. So that was really interesting to see. You actually kind of treat them more as a colleague in the Netherlands. In other countries, no. That's a big no-no. I've learned that in Belgium. You have to treat them very differently in Belgium. I got in trouble. And then it's kind of more of an open conversation that you have here. So you are able to go further into ideas and express concerns, kind of go your own way a little bit more than the trajected lesson plan, for example.
Yeah.
Like a Socratic dialogue more kind of thing.
Yeah,
definitely. Engaging in conversation. And I think that, I don't know, I really enjoyed that about grad school as well. I don't know if David and Carlton, you did that as well, as you're fully engaged and you're, having conversations as opposed to just reading rote.
Yeah. I liked, especially from going from undergrad to grad school, people in graduate school were there because they wanted to study that subject more. So the conversation was always more engaged and involved. Whereas in undergrad, you had people that kind of had to take the class and just wanted to get the grade and leave. So it was definitely a different, a different social structure, I guess, and how it went. But so it sounds like Europe is just better for college.
It's better in a lot of ways, in my opinion. But yeah, we're going to stick with that for now.
Yeah, I'm just I can't even get my students to read the syllabus, much less discuss anything important in class. It's just absolutely brutal in terms of having to sit in front of 30 students who are taking intro to archaeology as a gen ed science and try to talk to them about the consequences of proliferating different migration theories in the United States. And they're just sitting at me blank faced. I'm like, oh, sweet. Guess no one did the reading. Big surprise. So let me just kind of tell you why Solutrean is probably not the best thing in the world.
No, definitely. I've seen that for sure. And I find too that the discussions that you have here are less competitive than in North America. Everyone in North America, from my own seminar classes, was always trying to one-up the other or dispel someone else's opinion. And here it was just kind of a really nice, open, friendly conversation.
Yeah, that was David.
What's that?
You're always trying to undercut me, telling me I was stupid.
I don't. It was definitely inadvertent.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
it is competitive, at least from what I saw in grad school.
Yeah. Connor and I went through the same cohort and would just look at each other across the hall or the table and be like, what is happening right now? We're talking about some like in-depth theory thing we didn't understand. I think that's what you're referring to, but yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah, but we loved it. And I guess as a last question, what did you do for field work at all, if you did any in your undergraduate?
I wasn't able to do much field work in my undergraduate because it was so expensive to do.
Okay.
Yeah, to do like a summer field school, especially in the areas that I was studying. You know, they always had one in Jordan or in Crete. It was, $4,000 for the summer for the tuition. Plus, then you had to pay for your flight over there, everything else, and you couldn't work for the whole summer.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
yeah, I was never able to actually do field work during my undergrad. But since moving over here, since graduating, I did some field work in Macedonia. When I had my job, I used my vacation days to do some field work. And then when I moved over here in the Netherlands, once you pay tuition, it's covering the entire year. So if you want to go on a field school after, June when school ends, it's still covered. All you have to do is pay for your flight.
Oh.
Oh my God.
That's super cool. Yeah. I think my field school was like $6,000 just to go to Nashville.
Yeah, it's so expensive. Oh my gosh, it's ridiculous. And so it's so much more accessible over here. So during my master's last year, I went to Italy in the Puglia region. And then this summer I went to Thessaly in Greece and I dug there, which was really great to actually finally get to do that field work that I'd always wanted to do.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference for fieldwork or lab work or a mix of both?
So I really love being out in the field. It's something I love getting my hands dirty, being the physicality of it, getting that pickaxe in your hand and just like going at the dirt for 8 hours. That was really nice to do. And the camaraderie you get there in the lab, as a conservator, I'm always in the lab. So maybe for me, just getting out in the field for field season is just a good break, and it's kind of my moment to go crazy. But I do prefer the field work sometimes, just to kind of feel like I've accomplished something instead of looking at a minuscule retouch that I'd been doing for the last 8 hours.
Yeah, I definitely feel the same way, because in my job, I work in the CRM industry and I do mapping. So I sit at a computer all day, but I really enjoy those moments of when I'm able to get outside and do work and not just stare at a computer blankly for hours on end.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And on that note, somehow the Royal Mounted Police have found us after last week's syrup and moose jokes, and we have to sort this out really quick. We will be right back, hopefully.
Welcome back for segment 2 of episode 9 of A Life in Ruins podcast. We're here with our guest, Raven. And so real quick, Raven, what are you most interested in terms of archaeology and conservation?
Ooh, that's a tough one. For me, I'm study-wise, geographically, I'm a big Egyptologist, for sure.
Nice.
Live and breathe till I die. That's one of the main reasons I went to the University of Toronto, was to actually learn how to read hieroglyphs. A big nerd. But other than that, I did, my first field school was mosaics in Macedonia. I did conservation documentation of Roman mosaics there. And I thought that was pretty great because you're doing conservation on site. So actual archaeological site conservation, it was a big thing. It's kind of the best mix of both field work and lab work just in one spot. So you're outside, but you're still doing the lab work, which is sort of the perfect thing for me. And that's really a big interest that I have lately, now that I'm able to maybe go and find a job if there's one available. Then I would love to try and kind of push more into being on site and being an on-site conservator for the structures themselves, because that for me is the biggest thing, stabilizing the walls, making sure everything is, profiled, detailed properly, but also conserved, because it's all exposed now, right? That's the whole problem with archaeology. You're destroying everything as you're digging it. So I would love to be the one to kind of step in there and make sure everything is A-okay.
So I imagine you've done field work in Egypt, right?
I haven't. Oh my gosh, no, not yet. I really want to. I'm trying to find field work that's available in Egypt. It's really difficult to find people that are willing to take me, or unless you're paying for it, which is another thing I have to save up for. So if anyone's listening and they want to bring me to Egypt, I would love you so much, because it's still like a dream I would have. I would do anything. I'll just be a wheelbarrow, dumper. I'll just dump dirt. I don't really care as long as I get to Egypt to actually dig. It'd be great.
I actually know a guy. He's actually going to be a guest in 2 weeks, Dr. David Anderson. His wife is an Egyptologist, and they've popped me to go do field work in Egypt. They just have to put your name on a list like a year in advance for the country, and I will definitely let him know.
Oh my God, yes, please.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, I'm very excited now. Okay.
You can read hieroglyphs though, right?
Well, yeah, but you can't really sight read hieroglyphs, but I did a whole intensive on Middle Egyptian. So
that's so cool.
Well, from the historical documentary, The Mummy, I'm pretty sure Phoebe is able just to sight read hieroglyphs. Like, isn't that how the whole thing happens? That's another one that you should do for your YouTube.
That's November. We're doing that one in November. We've already planned.
Nice.
Perfect.
Oh my gosh, I'm excited.
Yeah, it's so much fun.
Okay.
But yeah, you cannot sight read hieroglyphs. That's a big no-no. But I want to do a whole video on that as well, just kind of talking about ancient languages, like a whole series on it and how to understand them, sort of approach them that way.
Perfect. But you do have field work experience, and it's in Macedonia, correct?
Yes, Macedonia was my first, and then I did some field work. I did more lab field work in Italy, and then this summer I did field work in Greece. That's
awesome. What kind of site did you work on in Macedonia?
It was a late Roman site, so kind of early Christian, and it was a site. It was a site called Stobi, and it's the Roman capital of Macedonia. So it's like their big, archaeological site there in the country. You can even see some of the mosaic images, the big peacock mosaic, on their currency. So they're very proud of this site. And the Balkan Heritage Field School runs both an archaeology excavation course there. They have the mosaic conservation course, and they also have a ceramic and glass conservation course there. So there are, 2 or 3 weeks, and it's a really interesting site, but they've been digging there forever, and you can actually go and see, like, it's a live dig. There's professional archaeologists there all the time willing to interact with you. Everything has been exposed. They have, an amphitheater. It was a huge city, and it was really amazing to be able to kind of be on that site for the 2 weeks there, because you're just living 500 meters from where you're working.
That's awesome. I saw when I was in Europe this summer, when I was in Croatia, I got to see a couple of the Roman sites. Of course, I didn't work there. I was just kind of there on vacation on my way back from Ukraine. But like, to see those amphitheaters was just absolutely astonishing. And to see Roman archaeology, I thought that was like the coolest thing in the world.
Oh yeah, no, it's really cool to see it that was my second major, was Roman archaeology. So to actually, kind of be on site, seeing everything that you're studying was, it made everything worth it, I guess,
Oh, absolutely. Like, I know here in the States, we learn about Greco-Roman history from a young age. So to actually be able to see it for yourself after only seeing it in pictures and heard about in textbooks was definitely like a really, in the realest sense, an awesome experience, like that it inspired awe.
Yeah, I was literally just going to piggyback on that and say, when I was in Rome last year, like, just having read all that in a book as a kid and like seeing pictures of it, and then just walking around downtown Rome, I was just like, in awe, because everything's just so old and cool. Whereas like here we have like a Walgreens and like a rundown 7-Eleven, and that's old for me. But it's nice over there to like I could like eat like pasta or whatever I was doing at this restaurant, and then like you could just see the Colosseum right there. It was cool. I'm done nerding out, but
well, no, Rome, everywhere you walk, there's something there, which is amazing.
Yeah.
If you, David, if you ever see an old rundown Blockbuster, you let me know, because you send me photos of that bad boy.
There is one on Long Island somewhere. It's probably been bought up by now, but irrelevant. But yeah, I'll get you some pictures.
They need some historic documentation, some little photography. Yeah.
There was one in Captain Marvel, actually, but it was in the time. But irrelevant. Carlton.
Sorry about that. So if you did field work, Roman site in Macedonia, which is awesome, and then lab work in Italy. What did that consist of in terms of like, what were the artifacts that you were curating? What culture was it? And kind of like this setting for Was it like a lab field school or just you were hired on?
It was a field school through the University of Amsterdam. So for all of the archaeology students that need their field school credits, they went there. But a classmate of mine and I, we didn't know what to do for the summer for our elective. And we just kind of emailed the guy who was in charge of it. And we said, hey, we're conservation students and that we would love to just come and help out with the site. They've never had a conservator on site. They've been digging there for 25 years. And so what we were doing there was, well, first of all, the lab wasn't really a lab. We were in a little corner of an old school that we were staying in. We had little, kids' desks all set up for our lab space. And we were cleaning and putting together all of the special finds. So anything that needed to be glued together, anything important that needed special attention that they didn't want to give the students with, the really rough toothbrushes, they came to us. And then we were doing that for 2 weeks there. And it was another Roman site, but a little bit earlier than the one in Macedonia.
So is that how it normally goes at sites? Is you have, I don't think it's super common here in North America, at least from the stuff I've done, is that you have someone who's familiar with conservation techniques on sites, because we don't really have curation people who end up like actually being out on site. We ultimately send our curation stuff to someone and they curate it. But it seems like in some places they have actual conservators, curators on site.
Sort of. So when I was in Greece, for example, they had the special conservators that were from the government, right? They were kind of employed as the conservators of this region. So if there was anything that needed to be properly handled in the dirt, like on site, if it was in situ, they would have to be called in to advise and make sure that everything was handled properly. So it's not normal to have a conservator on site normally there because of funding. Yeah. They always have fine processing people or people that are sort of in charge of the fine processing. So during the afternoon curation, so you guys call it curation over there. Is that what I had to Google this when you were talking about it before, because we don't call it curation. So I was really confused with that at first.
It depends on like what industry you're in. So like I'm technically a collections manager, but I'll call it curation. Honestly, it's just like, it depends on where you are, but curation's like the technical term for like the subfield, if that makes sense.
Okay. So it's because when I was looking it up, it seems a lot of like either collections management or preventive conservation, essentially, right?
Yeah, preventive conservation sounds way cooler, so I'm going to go with that.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Yeah, so we do have usually someone that is in charge of making sure all the finds are processed correctly, put in the correct spot, numbered correctly, and kind of stored as well as they can be at the time. It's not always someone who's employed. It can be, a volunteer, but like a higher up student who has a lot of experience that way, things like that. But there is usually someone dedicated to make sure that there's a special process happening and that nothing really gets lost in the mix.
Oh, that's really cool. And I like that, at least you mentioned earlier, that they're like state sponsored or locally sponsored. That could avoid a lot of problems that we have in like the cultural resource management industry and in North America, where we have people who just kind of don't use proper conservation techniques to get stuff out of the field or blow through bone beds and stuff like that. And having someone on staff and someone who could help with that would be a huge help. But I think I'm not sure that would completely work in our field, but it would be super interesting. I really like the principle of it. Yeah,
it's a little bit of a difficult thing to make happen, because even with the conservators in Greece, we called them in and they came on a special day and they said, okay, well, maybe we'll come back in 2 weeks to help you with this one thing that we needed a little bit more care to take out of the ground. And then once they left, I kind of said like to our field supervisor, I'm like, I'm a conservator, I can get this out for you. And then they were very happy that I could do it and kind of step in without having to wait, because it was, this little layer that we needed to get rid of earlier than 2 weeks from now. So I kind of spent the next 3 days very carefully working away at that. And it was a little bit nicer for them, so they didn't have to wait for it.
So you have a lot of experience. and you've done a lot of work. Now that you're graduated with your master's, like what are the fieldwork opportunities for you on the horizon coming up?
So far, nothing really. I'm still trying to come down from the whole handing in the thesis thing, but I am starting to kind of look more into field opportunities that will be available for next field season. Again, if the more experience I can get, the better. I would love to go to other parts in the Mediterranean or North Africa, Middle East kind of areas. Definitely going to, where I studied with my bachelor's, kind of go back to those roots and get more into archaeology, because I had my little 2 years of science and lab fun, but now I want to go back and get dirty a little bit. So I'm still looking. If anyone wants to bring me along for the ride, that'd be great. But other than that, it's, just staring into the abyss of post-grad life, which is always fun.
Come join the party. It is, I wouldn't say it's fun, but it is pretty fun.
I wish I could say it gets better, but I would most likely be lying.
In the States here, we usually I'm employed. Like I have an archaeological job right now, and I kind of got it through word of mouth with like a project that I was working on. But for other people, they can go through like Shovelbums, I think it's .org, or archaeologyfieldwork.net. In Europe, are there any networks like that for people like in your position to find archaeological employment?
Not really. Like every country, every sort of area has their own specific website.
Sure.
And because there's so many languages in Europe, it's a little bit difficult to find them and navigate through them. Okay. So that's kind of a challenge. Like my Dutch is not the best. I can order a beer. I can, ask for directions, but that's pretty much it. The important things, of course. Yeah. Definitely. But, trying to get a job doing, for example, CRM in the Netherlands can be a little bit tricky now for me, right? Because I don't speak the language, and it'll be a little bit difficult. Becoming a freelance conservator in the Netherlands as well, it's already very competitive. And throwing in the fact that I don't speak the language, no one's going to want me over the Dutch person, right? So it's one of those things. So right now I'm just kind of working at the job I had to get through school, paying off the student debt, which is always fun, and just kind of seeing if there are any more fieldwork opportunities. And eventually I'm sure I'll land into something eventually. But of course I really want to grow my YouTube channel, because that I think can kind of become my little baby and maybe be a full-time thing. Who knows if it gets big enough. So that's,
you're killing it.
Yeah, it's looking like you're going to end up that way.
Yeah.
Well, I have the time now for it, right? So now the graduation happened, and it's just full speed ahead with the YouTube channel, making sure I can get content once or even maybe twice a week, maybe come January, to make sure it's growing the way I want it to.
Well, let's keep the listeners on the edge of their seats, and let's take this in the next section. We'll talk about your YouTube channel.
Awesome.
Okay, so we're back with session 3 of episode 9 of A Life in Roots podcast with Raven, also known as Dig It with Raven, which is your YouTube channel. So I'm going to let you start. Would you like to explain to our listeners who probably haven't seen your channel yet, or if they have, what your channel is about?
Yeah, of course. So my channel, I guess I started it almost 2.5 years ago now. And it's a kind of a public access channel, I would say, for archaeology, art conservation, history, like visiting historical sites and museums, things like that, to kind of make it accessible for everybody. And I first started it because, well, I was living in Germany and I had no social life, so I had to be productive somehow. And I realized that when I was a bachelor student with archaeology, there were all of these things that I would have loved to have a quick little YouTube video about to explain it better or to understand it. So when I remember going to school and not having this resource, and I realized, well, I could be that resource. I can explain things in a way that can be a little bit better understood. and so on, and to make it maybe more exciting and fun for people to get into. So people that are maybe unsure about getting into the field or are afraid of the science behind it or anything like that, I can make it more exciting and not so stuffy, or as I call it on my channel, make it sexy.
Right. I had a teacher he was from New Zealand. He was one of my history teachers, and he taught history of Hellenistic Greece, the most fascinating class I've ever taken. And this is an aside, but he would call everything sexy as like, and he would say it in terms of being like right at the end of a sentence, and he'd be like, sexy. And he'd say it, and it's just like stuck with me. And when people say like, I got to make archaeology sexy, I hear it in that guy's voice, because it's honestly the truth. Because there's a lot of people that talk about archaeology that are great archaeologists, but it's the most dry thing I've ever heard, or it's just 45 minutes of a camera shaking in the background. And, it's just not accessible. So I really like that you use the word accessible too, because it's really hard to find that. So I commend you for doing that. It's super good. I know Carlton and Connor and I were a huge fan of your recent video.
Thanks.
Yeah. Carlton, you want to take that on?
I have to say, you beat us to the punch. Because those videos that you have produced, for years, and when I was an undergrad, I had the same thought about having a YouTube channel that talks about archaeology in an accessible and fun way. And we've always kept our eye on it. And then over this past summer, I think, is when we ran into you. I had this realization of we got beat to the punch. But not in like a bad way, because everything you've done on YouTube and your Instagram, which is also called Dig It with Raven, is really well done and really informative and really engaging. And your last video, was it your last video? The Indiana Jones one?
Yeah, it was my last one. that
was gold. For our listeners, it's Archaeologists React to Indiana Jones, and is it the last? It's not the Last Crusade, right? It's
no, it's Raiders of the Lost Ark.
The good one. And you did that with a friend of yours, right?
Yes, I did. My friend Jude, and I will not pronounce her last name because I know I will mess it up. But she is also an archaeologist. She's an osteologist. Just finished her master's as well, and yeah, we were realizing that everyone's doing these reaction videos, and when we're, talking about archaeology to people that have only experienced it through popular culture, it can become a bit of a headache or very, misunderstood. So we're like, well, let's do one ourselves, So we made some food, very themed food for raiders, and themed alcohol. And we just kind of had a really fun time watching it and pretending essentially to watch it for the first time, but through the archaeology lens. And it was really fun.
What's your favorite segment from that video?
Oh, gosh. Probably half the stuff that I cut out and that's not actually in the video.
It's usually how it goes.
Yeah, I made a behind the scenes thing for my Patreon, and that's when I had the most fun kind of going through all of our bloopers and just every time, they were eating dates, we'd be like, eat a date. And we'd eat a date. We'd dip it in the tahini and we'd, pretend we were there with them. I'm trying to convince Jude to dress up as Marion for Halloween because she could make a really good one. Things like that. But just kind of going through it and screaming at the television about, ruining all of the archaeological sites that, he's going through and just destroying everything. It was kind of fun to kind of really finally call that out and explain to people this is not okay.
So I know there's a part in that video where you and your friend get a little upset over a part, and I think we can insert that to this podcast right about here.
I told you not to be premature in your communicator, Berlin.
I have so many things about this.
He is not an exact
This is not what a dig looks like.
Does not deal in
My
time
God.
schedules.
That is just a chaotic site.
Yes. They literally just hired people to dig and there's no documentation.
No order.
No order. Where's the
Camels
measuring?
walking on site.
So the video is absolutely phenomenal, and your Instagram is also really engaging, and you have a lot of followers. This Archaeologists React to Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark it was published about 2 weeks ago, and it already has over 2,500 views. And another thing we noticed how long ago did you get your logo for your stuff?
I got it just before I launched officially. So that would have been late July, early August 2017, I believe. So a friend of mine She owns a tea store in Canada, but she also used to own with her husband this marketing company, and their logo designer or their designer had owed them a favor. And so she kind of called in that favor for me, and he designed it for me.
We've been struggling for months now for our own logo, and we finally got one that we liked, and then we realized how similar it was to yours.
I spent hours on this, and then I looked at the the me version of the cave art that's on that. We all decided, okay, cool, we're gonna do cave art, we're gonna make it simple, and it's gonna be like personalities of us. And then I saw that I'm holding the shovel in the corner, and I kind of like took it from this like cave art thing that we found. And then I saw yours today when I was talking to Carl before we did this, and I was like, oh no, it's literally your logo, so we can't use it now. So we have to.
Oh, sorry, guys.
You keep beating us to great ideas, and we're just trying to play catch up. So now we're like, all right, back to the drawing board, because that's what happens when the three of us get together to do something.
Do you outsource to Fiverr at all for things?
No, I do everything myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to do that, because we tried to outsource to Fiverr a few times, and that's the benefit of just being, I guess, on your own. Like, it's the three of us trying to argue over what we think would work and not work, and then we'll send it to Fiverr. And when you spend $20 to someone to do that on Fiverr to make you a nice logo, you get a $20 worth logo back. Yeah. And it is, or €36. I don't know what the transfer rate is.
We wanted to have a trumpeting mammoth holding a microphone, which we thought would be easy enough. Mm-hmm. But oh my good God.
Yeah,
the submissions we got, like, I guess we'll put them in on as links for the episode and throw them up on Instagram. Words can't explain. It was just like we told them, like, hey, can we have like somewhat similar to the Jurassic Park theme, but like not blatant? And the first one we got would have gotten us straight up legal trouble with Universal Studios, because that's all he did was copy the Jurassic Park font. We're like, we can't, even down to the colors. We're like, we can't use this, dude. No, and we went back and forth with this guy 4 or 5 times before finally we just ate it. We're like, sorry, dude, we don't want any part of this anymore. We're just going to do this on our own.
Yep. Oh, wow. Well, I have someone who can possibly help you out with that. Well, he's my boyfriend, actually. So he helps me with my thumbnails now because he's the Photoshop expert.
Nice.
And he's also the one holding the camera whenever we do one of the field trip episodes, which is really nice. He just took it one day and became my cameraman, so it's excellent. But he can definitely, if I can convince him, I probably can, to help you out with your logo.
Cool.
Perfect. What's your favorite video that you've done so far on YouTube?
For me, it would have to be the archaeologists trying to be sexy. The pickup lines video I did.
Oh yeah, that one came out like this summer, right? Yeah,
I filmed it while I was in Greece. I still have so much footage from there, but we were hanging out one night just talking about, archaeology themed pickup lines, and we made a whole list of them, and I was like, guys, we need to film this. We need to put this, on the internet. So somehow I convinced them all to try to be sexy and say their lines. And it was so fun to make. And everyone, because we were all so close during the dig, and I finished filming it there and editing it. So showing everybody firsthand and seeing their reactions to it and how much they loved it was very rewarding for me. That was I think my favorite one to work on.
Good.
I actually saw that when it came out, and I was still in Ukraine, and I showed it with my crew in Ukraine, and they loved it. I loved it, and we thought about doing it, but there was they wanted to do it in Ukrainian. I'm like, guys, I don't know any Ukrainian. I'm sorry.
I do want to do a part 2. People keep asking me for part 2, and we did make enough to do it. So part 2 might come soon.
My undergrad professor wanted our motto for the field school to be archaeologists always looking for good dates, and it was just funny the first time, but not, for the whole summer, and to be put on a t-shirt. And we did a mustache Monday thing, and I had shaved just to have a mustache, and there's a picture of me leaning on a pole, and someone made a meme of it, and it's just me looking creepy as hell, ever. And it says archaeologists looking for good dates, and I'm gonna find it and I'll put it on our Instagram. It's terrible, but it belongs in a video like that because it's bad. I think I'm 22 at max. Moving on. But yeah.
Sounds amazing.
Carlton, didn't you just do a pun about dates on your presentation at Plains?
all of my publications and presentations so far have been puns. So there's what is it? It's like dating apps and archaeology, matching the radiocarbon record with indigenous oral traditions. And then the other one is recovering from bad dates, like moving forward with radiocarbon. Like, yeah.
There you go.
The first one, I think I'm a genius, and like people our generation love it. But then like when I'm at a conference, like at Plains, and I'm sitting in front of mostly a crowd of 50 to 60s who are definitely not part of the online dating scene, like it just goes right over their heads. And I'm sitting up there giggling like an idiot after I like say the title of my talk, and they're just like, this kid's a friggin' moron, like why is he laughing at his own presentation? And I'm like, well, I think I'm clever.
Speaking of dating and dates, your next video that you're working on is on carbon dating, right?
Yes, I've been editing that all day.
Yeah.
Do
you guys use like Final Cut, or do you use Adobe, or do you mind explaining like how you guys do that? Or
I use Adobe Premiere Pro.
Okay.
So I learned how to do that. I used to use Lightworks because it was free, and then I was able to get Premiere very sneakily. But I was able to get Premiere. I learned Premiere. I did a bunch of Skillshare videos on how to do it, so I had to learn it all myself. And so I've been kind of going, whenever I need to add a new effect or try something new with a video, I have to kind of learn it myself and do it as I go. Right. So that's why it's been taking a little bit longer, but now I'm getting into a really good rhythm with Premiere, which is nice. And it's a very, very cool program to use.
Yeah, I like it when it doesn't crash on me. But
yeah, it takes so much bandwidth from my computer. Like it's overheating constantly. Like I need a desktop to edit all the videos I do, because when they export, it just heats everything up so quickly. And I've lost a couple hard drives from it because they heat the hard drive up, and it's ridiculous. But I do like it. I don't think I'll change it for a while because it does everything I need it to do. And I'm not the most computer savvy person. And so for me to be able to kind of, because I'm doing this all by myself. So for me to actually be able to learn it and put out decent quality videos, it was really nice to have that resource.
Yeah. YouTube's and Skillshare has been a really good source of information for, I guess, us and for my stuff personally, but it's been helpful. I wouldn't be able to, I guess we wouldn't have done the podcast, or I couldn't do ethnosinology without YouTube.
No, they're big resources for sure.
Is there well, you can be quiet, Connor. Is there? I'm so sorry.
Shit.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. I don't know. Okay. I love your Instagram, by the way. Still dig it with Raven. Is there another Instagram profile? Like, do you have like a profile that you like to follow at all on Instagram? Like another archaeology based one that you find like really interesting or competitive?
The most recent one that I found that I love is, what's her name? Amelia Archaeologist.
Amelia Archaeologist. That's her girl.
Yeah, she's so cool. And we chat all the time now on Instagram, both on her personal and her archaeology one. So she's someone I really want to meet in person. She seems really like such an amazing, human being. So I've been loving following her and all of her videos. And another one I've been following is called Mummy Stories.
I haven't heard of that.
I haven't heard of that one either. I'm gonna have to check it out. I'm gonna do that right now.
Yeah, it's not quite archaeological, but it's run by this woman called Angela Stein, and I just met her when I was in Italy last month, and she studies human remains and their display, the ethics in displaying them, the conservation, all this stuff. And so she wants to kind of bring out these public stories about human interaction with human remains, whether they be mummies or bones, things like that. And so it's actually really interesting to read people's first interactions with them, how they view human remains, what their opinions are about them, things like that. It's really nice.
Yeah.
I know with Amelia, I met her in person. She actually came to one of my talks here in Boulder, and she was absolutely phenomenal. It's actually because of her we're getting all of our podcasts transcribed on YouTube. So that way audiences who are deaf or deaf plus can have access to our content, because that's something she brought to light to us, that, you know, this is purely audio and there's a segment of the population that just can't, that isn't privy to it. And it was really awesome to meet her and then have those discussions. So I'm like really glad that you're talking with her. Like, I think that's awesome.
Oh no, she's super cool. And she also kind of sparked that for me. Whenever I do an Instagram video now, I make sure I have, I use the app that kind of subtitles
I noticed
it.
you did that.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's dope.
I want to make sure that it's accessible to everybody, and kind of, you know, there was one of those things where on Instagram, especially, you don't really think about it. My YouTube videos have always been closed captioned, and I've always made sure that it's correct. I always go through that, but I never thought about it for Instagram stories, for example, because they're just so quick. So it was kind of really nice to make sure that that was taken care of, essentially.
Well, with everything you've learned in school with both your degrees now and with doing this YouTube, like, what have you learned about, like, you know, public archaeology? Like, what do you like most?
I love when I get emails from people. I know sometimes people don't really like when they get pestered all the time from the public and from, you know, random people emailing you. But I love getting emails from younger students, like high school students I've been getting a lot of, or early bachelor students, kind of saying, you know, I've seen your videos. I was thinking about going into archaeology or even art conservation, and I was a little unsure. But after seeing this, I'm really interested in it. It's something I want to pursue. How can I get there? You know, this is what I'm doing. These are my limitations, my interests. You know, what can I do to kind of follow this path? And I love getting those, so that I can actually help people get into the field, have them understand what they need to do, because I didn't have anything, especially with conservation. It's such a weird field to try and get into. You need all this extra prep work, all these internships before you even apply, extra chemistry classes, everything. So being able to share that and kind of help people get to that point is really nice. I think that was the best thing that has come out of this for me. And then also meeting really amazing people online too, you know, with public archaeology. On social media especially, is such a beast in its own way in comparison to normal public archaeology. Essentially, you can have a lot more conversation, and you can explain things. You can take the time to write things down and talk to people individually, get that one-on-one information to make sure that people are understanding it, but also appreciating it and walking away with something that they can also come back to, because they can save a post, they can rewatch a video, things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I have to say real quick, with like getting feedback from the public, I definitely have to give a shout out to Katie Ibsen. She sent us, I guess it was like email of support earlier in the week. And I definitely have to say, well, it was a week ago, that getting that email from her actually made my week, because I was so stressed about the conference and like wondering if I'm not prioritizing right. And like getting that email from her to our podcast Gmail was awesome. So we actually read that stuff. And second, do you follow Archaeology Gains on Instagram?
Yeah, we've had some good chats.
Perfect. Oh God, we love him. He is one of our favorite people on this planet, and I absolutely love his Instagram. But on that note, I have to say that it's been phenomenal having you on. We've really followed your social media, and I'm a fan of all the work that you're doing. And I know like we're trying to aspire to get to that point with the YouTube channel and engaging with the public. So like, thank you for what you do and engaging with the public. I think it's
you're kicking ass.
Extremely important. It looks like Archaeology Gains is in another battle over evolution, so we're going to have to cut it short. So we just chatted with Raven Todd DaSilva. She's an archaeologist and conservator that runs the popular and informative YouTube channel, Dig It with Raven, and her Instagram by the same name. So Raven, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to seeing what comes next in your career.
Good.
Carlton, you forgot the mega question.
Oh, absolutely. And if you had the second chance, or if you could do this all over again, would you continue to live your life in ruins?
Oh, definitely. And I would do it sooner. I spent too much time kind of trying to find myself or do my own thing. I would definitely do it, years ago instead of doing my first field experience this year.
Thanks for listening to A Life in Ruins podcast.
You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at A Life in Ruins Podcast, and you can also email us at alifeinruinspodcast@gmail.com.
And remember, make sure to bring your archaeologists in from the cold and feed them beer. So a conservator falls down, clutching his chest, and people run over him and try to help. The ambulance comes and tries to take him away, but other conservators won't let him go. What is their reasoning?
I don't know, dude.
He belongs in a museum!
We're sorry that you had to deal with him.
Did you make that up yourself?
Oh, yeah.
This show is produced by the Archaeology Podcast Network, Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle in Reno, Nevada at the Reno Collective.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.